Hello and welcome back to yet another Yap session. I've been seeing a lot of growth in my channel lately, so if you're new here, hi, I make art commentary videos, and if that's your thing, welcome, I'm happy to have you here. At the time of recording this, I just reached a little over 4K subscribers, and while I'm still a pretty small channel, I have a lot of fun making videos, and I genuinely really appreciate everyone's support, so thank you. As you've surely seen by the title, today I'm going to share my 10 most unpopular art opinions, just based on all the discussion I frequently see in the art community on these topics. I tend to get a lot of comments disagreeing anytime I mention these things in my short form videos, and I thought it might be interesting to gather up all of my opinions in one place. So here are my personal top 10 unpopular art opinions. And again, these are just my opinions, feel free to kindly disagree if you want, or share some of your own in the comments. With that, let's get into it. Starting with number 1. Making art is not all about improving. For a lot of people, including myself, what we love most about drawing is the freedom of creativity and expression. I feel like some people think that the skill level of an artist is more important than them simply trying to express themselves through their art, and I definitely disagree. You don't have to set your sights on constantly improving when making art, especially if it's just a hobby. You don't have to always be searching for the most rapid and efficient way to grow, because you will learn and improve simply by drawing. While doing studies and learning fundamentals are definitely very helpful, there is no wrong way to make art, which is the beauty of it. You should feel free to experiment and make new things without feeling the pressure to make it perfect or always one-upping your previous work. Perfectionism often destroys creativity. Draw what you want and have fun doing it. Just because you're an artist doesn't mean you have to become a professional at it if you don't want to. Everyone learns at their own pace, and that is perfectly fine. Opinion number 2. There's no such thing as bad art, only art you don't personally like. Art is so insanely subjective. Everyone has different personal tastes and opinions, and just because it's not your cup of tea doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it wasn't made for you. Even if you don't like certain art styles, you can appreciate the skill and time that went into a piece while still disliking it. I found that people online are, unsurprisingly, very judgmental about certain art styles and call it bad art, when in reality it just comes down to personal preference. You are not going to like every piece of art you see, and that is okay. Just accept that you don't like it and move on. It's generally become way too common to hate on an art style and insult the artist just because you don't like it, but they don't have to conform to what you personally think good art looks like. In my opinion, there is no set definition for good or bad art, only art that you objectively like or dislike, and that sentiment is entirely up to the viewer. On to number 3. Unsolicited art advice is annoying and unnecessary. In my experience, most people giving out advice are not even qualified to be doing so and have no idea what they're talking about. If you're not a professional or at least a very, very experienced artist, you have no business giving out art advice. And even if you are, you should always ask if an artist wants your advice and be able to take no for an answer. I find that most people tend to give out critiques based on their own personal style preferences rather than fundamentals that can be helpful and applicable to all art styles. Just appreciate the art for what it is and don't pick it apart if the artist didn't ask for your opinion. Adding on to that, it's perfectly okay to dismiss criticism because it's up to you as the artist to decide whether it's worth listening to or not. You don't always have to be receptive to every single criticism or opinion imposed on your art, and that doesn't make you a bad artist. Especially if the advice is completely unhelpful and unsolicited to begin with. That, and it's impossible to please everyone anyway. If you are actually seeking constructive criticism, go to someone whose opinion you value and know you can trust rather than a stranger who very likely isn't an artist. And this brings us to number 4. Unless you want to draw in a realistic style, your end goal doesn't need to be to make your art as realistic and/or as detailed as possible. Part of the fun of stylization is pushing features of your art to make something unique. Large, sparkly, anime-like eyes aren't anatomically correct, but tons of styles have them, and I personally love how they look. I also like chibi styles, where the head is typically drawn much bigger than the body. Again, that's not technically correct anatomy, but it's an art style that a lot of people like. Realism is not inherently better or more difficult than any other art style, and it just really bothers me that it's presented as the most respectable form of art by a lot of people. Any form of art should be valued, whether it's a simplified cartoon depiction or incredibly realistic. If you like drawing exaggerated proportions or have a very simplified style, that's great. Stylization is entirely up to the artist, and not everything needs to be a form of realism to look good or have value. Moving on to number 5. Anyone can learn how to draw, and talent has nothing to do with it. This is something that has bothered me for a really long time. Growing up, I've always had family or friends compliment my art and then say, I could never do that. But you could if you just took the time to learn. Certain people may have aptitudes that can make it easier for them to learn new skills and give them slight advantages, but it doesn't mean that people without those advantages can't still do the exact same thing. It just might be a little harder for them. Anyone can learn to draw, and no one is born with an innate talent for art. All artists put in hours of hard work to get where they are, and it's honestly kind of insulting and devalues their work to say that it's just talent and not a skill that they have worked towards developing. It's never too late to learn how to draw if you truly want to. And for number 6, tracing is not always inherently a bad thing. It can be a great tool to learn proportions or anatomy, and honestly it's harmless unless you are one-to-one directly tracing someone's work and then trying to pass it off as your own original idea. Personally, I would not trace another artist's work without express permission, but if you use a base or other reference art specifically created for that purpose, I don't see the problem with that. Just be honest and make sure to give credit where credit is due. Another great way to learn while using tracing is just to take pictures of yourself and use it as a guide. That way, you're not using anything that isn't already yours since you took the photo, and sometimes it's easier than endlessly searching the internet for a specific reference you can't find. As long as you aren't using tracing to steal someone else's work and you make sure to credit when required, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it in my opinion. As for number 7, hate and negativity are becoming way too normalized within the art community. And honestly, online toxicity as a whole seems to be on an upward trend, especially over these past few years. I've seen everything from repeated issues with art theft, to people pretending to draw what is clearly an AI-generated image, to fixing someone else's art without permission, and so much bullying. I cannot even name the amount of artists I have personally seen be harassed so much that they just end up leaving their account and never posting again. While yes, this is unfortunately nothing new on the internet, a community should be a place where people who share common interests can come together and connect with each other, not a place for constant drama and discourse. Nowhere is going to be perfect, but we should all be supporting each other and being a whole lot kinder. Hell, I've even had some people tell me that artists can't learn or improve without hate. Judge for yourself the validity of that statement, but it sounds pretty insane to me. It feels like it has quite the opposite effect on most people, actually. Bad apples are always going to exist in spaces online, but it shouldn't be so many that it ruins the community part of the art community. I know it's cliche, but whatever happened to treating others how you want to be treated? Real artists don't have a superiority complex over their peers, and they support fellow artists, not tear them down. Moving on to number 8, the usage of generative AI is ruining creativity, and it has no place in art no matter what you're using it for. I feel like all of us artists can agree that AI-generated art is bad, yet I see so many people saying, oh yeah, I only use it for blank, when obviously those resources already exist because what was generative AI trained off of? Already existing art and references. You don't need it to generate something to redraw, go find inspiration elsewhere. You don't need to use it as a reference because 1, it's notoriously going to be full of errors, and 2, so many other references made by real artists already exist online. You don't need it to give you a prompt because have you seen the amount of art prompts online for free? Ones that are actually written by a human to help inspire you? There are even monthly prompt lists and art challenges that give you something to draw every single day. And I know some people are going to be mad at me for saying this, but the same goes for writing too, and character AI is not any better. If you didn't already know, AI data centers consume massive amounts of electricity to power themselves, and that generates a lot of heat, which in turn requires a lot of water to cool them down. Not only does using generative AI have a massive harmful environmental impact, it was not trained ethically. All of that should be a deal breaker, and I think a lot less people should be relying on AI for inspiration when you can simply use your imagination or other readily available less harmful resources. It's far better to get inspired by another human's work rather than a computer-generated, exploitive imitation of creativity. And now for number 9. If you have a Sona, it does not need to look exactly like you. In my opinion, this is such a strange thing for there to be debate around because artists have been drawing themselves as silly little characters in Sonas for forever. If you've ever read a manga, so many of these artists leave little author's notes in the book with a funny drawing to represent themselves. For example, in Full Metal Alchemist, the artist draws herself as a silly little cow with glasses. It's the same concept with VTubers too, and I totally understand wanting to have a really pretty, vibrant character to represent yourself without actually looking that way in real life. It's just another form of self-expression, like all art is in the first place. Even my Sona, which I intentionally tried to make look like me, isn't totally accurate. I wear glasses, but I didn't want to add those. I draw myself with winged eyeliner when I hardly ever wear makeup. It's just really strange to me to police what someone's character they use to represent themselves should look like. If you have the ability to draw, you can draw literally anything you want, so I really don't see the problem with an artist's Sona not looking exactly like them. And with artists like me that decide to not show their face, you wouldn't even know the difference anyway. Let people have fun and be creative with their Sonas. And finally, my 10th and probably most controversial take, art regression is not real, at least not in most contexts that it's used in. I've made a whole video about this already, which is linked in the description, but the way that the art community has taken the term art regression to over-exaggerate and constantly misuse honestly really pisses me off. The repeated incorrect usage of the term has warped it into just another thing to say to bully artists. It is not art regression to change your art style into something more simplistic, and you won't randomly lose skill or get worse if you consistently make art. The only applicable time to say that someone has experienced art regression is if they stopped drawing for a long time and then started again. Natural skill regression is a consequence of not using those skills consistently, but you can always relearn what you forgot even if that does happen to you. It shouldn't be something used to shame an artist over, regardless of if they actually regressed or simply changed their art style and other people just don't like it. Conscious, intentional choices made to an art style by the artist is not art regression. So yeah, in no particular order, those were my 10 most unpopular art opinions. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on them, and if you want, feel free to leave your own down below. Now, I know this is the internet, and maybe this is too much to ask, but please keep the discussion kind and respectful. I really don't want this video or my channel to be a place that fosters negativity and hate comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!